Hello, I am Michael.
And I'm Rebecca.
And we are the hosts of Just Us Thinking.
Come and join us on Tuesdays and Thursdays to have a little fun and a good laugh or two.
We talk about all kinds of everyday things, and we like to have a few laughs ourselves.
You can find us on your favorite podcast player at Just Us Thinking, but make sure to drop that G.
Make sure you also hit that subscribe button, and you can follow us on Facebook.
Thank you for listening.
Welcome to Ouch. Was that a ghost? This podcast may contain graphic material, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
Help me.
Now that we covered that, here's your host, Liz.
Welcome back to Ouch, Was That a Ghost? Can you ever truly trust the people closest to you? Today I'm covering a Valentine's Day getaway that ended in murder. Steve and Kim Hricko were driving about 70 miles from Laurel, Maryland to St. Michael's, which is located on the eastern shore of Maryland. The couple were headed to a romantic Valentine's Day weekend at the Harbortown Resort, the highlight of the weekend being a murder mystery dinner. A little bit about the couple. Steve Michael Hricko was born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, November 22nd, 1962. He was a big guy. He was about 6'4". He was described as shy, reserved, an introvert, a big gentle giant. He went to Penn State in the mid-1980s alongside his best friend Mike Miller. While going to college, Mike met his girlfriend and future wife, Maureen. Maureen was the one that met Kim while working as a waitress and thought Kim and Steve would hit it off great. So Mike and Maureen introduced the two. Maureen said, quote, "We introduced them and we went out on a double date, and from that point on they seemed to hit it off." Kim, who was also going to Penn State, was described as very social, outgoing, and extrovert, just the polar opposite. Steve treated her like a princess and would do anything for her. The two fell deeply in love. Steve and Kim married in 1989, and Mike was the best man and Maureen was the maid of honor. A few months later, Mike and Maureen got married, and Steve was their best man and Kim was their maid of honor. Within the year, Kim and Steve had a daughter. The couple stayed very close. Both of the guys worked in maintaining golf courses, country clubs. After college, Steve was a superintendent of golf courses at a few different places. Then in the 90s, Steve was working at the Patuxent Green Golf Course by Laurel, Maryland, and Mike was working at the Harbortown Golf Course in St. Michael's. Both of the guys settled in Maryland, Steve settling in the suburb of Laurel, and Kim worked as a surgical technologist at a local hospital, like setting up and breaking down the operating room. They lived comfortably, they had busy lives, but they still had time for friends and family. They lived in a new, beautiful home. They had a dog, a cat, seemingly an all-American family. But as the years went by, the couple started having problems. It was just getting bumpy. A neighbor claimed that Kim would say how she had to do everything and how she was just over it. She didn't want to be married to him anymore. It wasn't just to her neighbors that she was complaining. She'd complain to coworkers and friends about how Steve didn't want to go anywhere or do anything. Steve was happy just sitting in the house with the family. I mean, she knew he was a shy, introverted guy, while Kim was a person, I guess, not ready to be anchored down. It got to the point where Kim asked for a divorce. Steve was crushed, and he wanted to try and save the marriage, so they started counseling together and separate. They were both putting in the work, so it appeared both wanted to try and repair what they had. Steve set up a getaway to try to work in the marriage. And it was actually Mike who told Steve about the Valentine's getaway weekend because it was where he worked. Mike even offered to watch their daughter, but they ended up leaving the daughter with a neighbor who was watching her for the weekend. And off they went on this trip that Steve had been planning for weeks. Back to the couple driving to St. Michael's. The romantic seaside resort he booked was in Chesapeake Bay. It was a weekend where they could shut off from work, parenting, all the noise, and just focus on the marriage. The couple arrived on February 14th, Valentine's Day, 1998, along with 100 other couples. Each couple received a bottle of champagne upon arrival. The rooms had fireplaces. It just set a really romantic tone for the weekend. And that night, they went to a murder mystery show at the resort. The show was titled The Bride Who Cried. The The groom in the show dying after drinking a poison drink, and the audience gets this immersive experience interacting with the actors and trying to figure out who done it. The couple seemed to enjoy the night. The show ended around 10 p.m.-ish, and everyone started funneling back to their rooms. Fast forward to a little bit before 1:30 a.m., where a hotel employee was on duty named Elaine Phillips, and her cousin Philip Parker was there because he just happened to be staying at the resort. And in walked Kim, who reported that her room was on fire. Elaine looked up the room number, found out it was 506, and her cousin Philip ran across the parking lot to the room. Philip ran around the back of the villa, which had a sliding glass door that was cracked open, and by crouching down, he could see legs and feet. He found a male lying in between the two beds. He and Elaine managed to drag the man out, his face burnt beyond recognition. The Maryland State Police, the Sheriff's Department, and Fire Department was quickly on scene. Although they did pull Steve out, it was too late. Steve Hricko was pronounced dead at the scene. They figured it was Steve because it was only Kim and Steve staying in the room. Kim, after making her way to the scene, asked the officers if she could, quote, see her husband's body. The fire had pretty much already extinguished itself. It, burned itself out. So on the scene came Deputy Fire Marshal Michael Mulligan and his black lab named Bear. How cute is that? Bear was trained in detecting accelerants along with explosives, and the two went to search for the origin of the fire. As they went in, Bear alerted by the rear sliding glass door where they brought Steve out, and on the carpet by the bed. Right away, it stood out as odd that most of the room was untouched by the fire. There was very little flame damage. It was sort of contained to the bed that Steve was most likely laying on and the rug by that bed. The room had 2 twin beds with the headboards that are fixed on the wall and a nightstand in between them. Right away, the fire marshal noticed that there was a plastic bottle on the nightstand, and one side of it was extremely singed. It would be singed because the heat is more on that side, if that makes sense. And that burnt side was towards the bed where Steve would have been lying. And they were just looking for the source of the fire. So what they do is you follow the least fire damage to the most, because the most fire damage that was burning the longest time is most likely the origin of the fire. And they narrowed the source to most likely near the pillow area or the top of the bed where Steve was lying. They found an open case of beer and some partially drunken beer bottles, a watch, some cash, some chewing tobacco, and an open pack of backwoods cigars with one of the cigars missing. So maybe a cigar sparked the flame, initially assuming it was a tragic smoking accident. Kim told officers how she and her husband came here for a Valentine's weekend and how they went to the show and Steve was drinking a lot. And on the way back to their room, they stopped and bought some beers from the Cash Bar before going back to the hotel room, where they watched the end of Tommy Boy, the movie. On top of his drinking that night, she claimed that he took antidepressants, muscle relaxers, some Xanax, some cold medicine, and she describes Steve as very sloppy that night. And she claims they went back to their room, where she said he kept drinking, he had cigars, and he was bugging her to have sex with him. When she didn't want to, Kim said that Steve got angry, so Kim just took herself out of the situation to not argue, leaving it around 11 p.m. She went on to describe how she headed to her friend's house, the Millers, Mike and Maureen, that didn't live too far. They lived in Easton, which was about 15 minutes away, but she said she got lost. She asked some people for directions, and eventually she went back to the resort a few hours later, after not being able to find the Miller's house. When she got back, she realized at the front door that she forgot her key card, the front door being locked, so she went around the back because she remembered earlier they left the sliding door open a crack. And she explained how she approached the sliding glass door. The inside of the room was filled with smoke, and this heat hit her. There was no fire alarm going off, and the light wasn't on inside the room. The couple's romantic weekend ending in tragedy. And she said this is when she went to the front lobby. Steve's body was brought back to the medical examiner's office, where the autopsy came back that Steve had burns on his torso, arms, and head, which was to be expected. But Steve's lungs were clear. There was no soot. The carbon monoxide levels were normal. That meant he wasn't breathing in any smoke. And if you're not breathing in smoke, you're not alive. Steve had died before the fire started. So that ruled out smoke inhalation. They took blood and tissue samples to have them analyzed. The state police also found that there was no carbon monoxide in Steve's blood. And if you remember, Kim said how he was sloppy, he was drunk. Steve's blood alcohol level was 0.0. So now the investigators have a clear idea of how he did not die. All they knew was that Kim's recounting of events did not match up with the physical evidence. They decided to start talking to the couple's friends, who some of them even reached out to authorities before they were contacted. And as they were talking to them, they realized that no one ever knew Steve to smoke cigars, and he did not like the smell of smoke being around him. Officers' antennas were raised. They had arson investigators try and recreate the scene with the same kind of cigar and the hotel's flame-retardant pillow. As they lit the cigar and kept putting it on top of the pillow, it kept going out. Because cigars aren't made with like a built-in accelerant. They tried this multiple times, but it would not stay lit. It would need an accelerant or a torch, meaning this was not an accident. An accelerant was not found in the room, although Bear had alerted in 2 places, but it could have burnt off, it could have evaporated. So to authorities, this was a purposefully set fire, and Steve died prior to the fire. It was now being investigated as a homicide. They spoke to one of Kim's friends from college, named Rachel, and Rachel said how on January 30th, around 7:30 p.m., she and Kim talked on the phone. They said goodbye, hung up. Rachel went out to eat, and when she came home at around 9:30, she had about 5 or 6 messages on her answering machine from Kim, all sounding panicky. So she called Kim back, and Kim was like, hey, remember when I saved you in college? I need you. Rachel, who lived in Baltimore, got to Kim's that night at around 11:30, and when she arrived, Kim was clearly distraught and appeared to be drinking. And Kim told Rachel her plan to paralyze Steve, give him a drug like succinylcholine, which would knock him out if given enough and kill him, and she could set a fire with a cigar and everyone would think it's smoke inhalation. And Rachel kept trying to point out flaws, and Kim kept having a retort. She was like, no one would believe this because he doesn't smoke. And Kim was like, I'll put it in his life insurance policy that he does. At one point, Rachel describes how Kim went upstairs to use the bathroom and a little bit of time passed, and she walked upstairs to kind of check on her. And she found Kim just standing in her bedroom, and Steve was in their bed. Rachel didn't even know that Steve was there until now. And Kim was just staring at Steve, arms by her side, like creepy much. Rachel did manage to get her out of the room, and Rachel was like, why don't you just get a divorce? And Kim was like, no, this is much easier. She was like, well, what about your daughter? And Kim was like, oh, no, it's okay. She's better off. After Kim finally went to sleep for the night and Rachel knew that nothing was going to happen that night, she left and went home. They spoke the next day and she was like, you're not going to really do this, are you? And Kim was like, I don't know. And I guess that was it. No follow-up. They didn't talk again. After authorities got this information, they contacted the medical examiner to test for succinylcholine, which is a powerful muscle relaxer, which is injected into the tissue, and with a larger dose and no assisted breathing, it can be deadly. It could stop your heart, it will stop your breathing. Remember, Kim is a surgical technician, and she uses this stuff pretty much daily and has access to it. They did look for this in Steve's body, but nothing was found. But the problem with this drug is it gets broken down by the body so quickly, like within minutes, so it wouldn't have been found. Thinking maybe Kim used a syringe, the room and water near the hotel were searched, but nothing was found. A few days later, a hotel employee, while cleaning the grounds, found a syringe on the property. The Maryland State Police tested the syringe, but they couldn't get any prints, anything useful off of it. So they started talking to some more of Kim's acquaintances, one being a former coworker at the last hospital she worked at, one Dr. Kenneth Burgess. He recounted how about a month earlier, they were standing around and Kim said she wanted to have Steve murdered, and if he could or if he knew someone that could. And she offered him, as the doctor perceived it at the time, jokingly, $50,000. Thinking this was dark humor, he just kind of fed into it. He retorted, quote, why would you want to kill your husband? You work in the operating room. You could put him to sleep. Why don't you just give him some curare and put him to sleep? And when Steve turned around to look at Kim, he claimed that she didn't look like she was joking. The police asked Kenneth to try and record Kim incriminating herself, and he did try. 3 times he tried unsuccessfully on controlled calls. So investigators continued to dig. They saw that Kim had recently upped life insurance coverage, so she stood to gain up to $450,000. And she also added that Steve was a smoker, which as the interviews continued, everyone that was asked said Steve did not smoke and he hated the smell. Another friend and neighbor, Teresa Armstrong, told how Kim was going to ask Steve for a divorce and got the impression, quote, that she had been thinking of different ways to kill him. The neighbor was like, what do you get out of it? And Kim was basically like, for the insurance money so she and her daughter could live how they wanted to. I mean, this Kim really likes to talk, I guess. They were talking to another acquaintance of Kim's. They talked to one of Kim's coworkers, Jennifer Gowan, who told authorities how the talks over time changed from wanting a divorce to that, quote, that she would like to kill him, that he didn't really have anything going on outside the family, so Kim said that Steve would be better off dead. But she didn't want Steve to kill himself because if he did, then they couldn't collect the insurance money because it would be a suicide. She told other friends how people have used succinylcholine in the past and gotten away with it, and how it couldn't be found in the body. Another motive came up. Kim had another reason to want out of the marriage. She had been having an affair with her co-worker Jennifer Gowan's cousin, named Brad. Kim met the 22-year-old Marine, who Kim's 32 and Brad's 22. Kim met the 22-year-old Marine at Jennifer's wedding festivities, and the two started sneaking around. And Kim kept telling all of her friends about it, and Kim was really upset that Jenny was not supporting her in this. Like, what? The night before Kim and Steve left for the trip, Kim had to make a little pit stop by Brad's house to drop off his Valentine's Day gift with a note that read, "Brad, I really want to give you all these gifts in person, but I guess the Pentagon had a different idea. I'm so proud of what you do, so I'll just go on missing you. Have a nice weekend at home, baby. I sure look forward to seeing you soon. Happy Valentine's Day, sir. I love you so very much. Hugs and kisses, Kim." After dropping this, she went by Teresa's house, her neighbor, for a few hours, just saying how much she was not looking forward to the trip. The funniest thing about this is Brad was spoken to, and he basically said it was a fling. And he handed over all these notes, like love letters that Kim wrote to him. It just appears that she was way more into it than he was. The authorities brought Kim in again to speak to, who Kim stood by her story that Steve was drinking and bought cigars. And she admitted the marriage was having some problems, but she said that they were both working on it. They were trying to work it out. And then the authorities were like, yeah, well, we know that he had no alcohol in his system and his carbon monoxide levels were normal. And we know about Brad. So she just started crying. See, this is the one time that I think the police royally screwed up in this case. Kim, asked the officers, "If I tell you what happened, can I go home and see my daughter?" And they just straight up were like, no. And their interview ended when she invoked her right to counsel. Like, they could have tried to make some kind of deal with something to get her to, like, she seemed like she wanted to confess there. But that's just me. What do I know? Kim left the station and went to go stay with the Millers that night. You know, Mike and Maureen. The police showed up at the Millers' house with a search warrant for Kim's car. And Kim, when she heard this, she threw the keys at the officers and was like, okay, I'm going to take a bath. Remember, she's at her friend's house. Like, how odd is that? And the car's getting searched, like, because of you. But anyway, she went up to go take her bath. So Maureen went upstairs to check on her. Kim was in the bathroom with an empty bottle of Xanax. Kim was taken to receive medical care and got a psych eval. A nurse at the hospital said basically she didn't take Xanax. Whatever she took, aspirin would have been more dangerous than what she took. So it seems like Kim just wanted to either buy time or get out of the situation. They got a search warrant for Kim's house. During the search of the home, they found Steve's diary, which it's heartbreaking if you read the things that he wrote. Like, he was really, really trying to save the marriage, and he was all excited about planning this vacation and just how much he was trying to work on himself, and a whole bunch of love notes he wrote to his wife that he truly loved. They also found the life insurance policy. With everything they have collected so far, with the inconsistencies, the police decided to arrest and charge Kim. On February 25th, Kim was arrested and charged with arson and first-degree murder. On January 11th, 1999, which was 11 months after Steve's death, the trial began, where Kim pled not guilty. The acquaintances and Ken all recounted their conversation and the plan that Kim had laid out to them about how she wanted to drug him, stage the scene, set the fire. Brad testified. The life insurance payout was brought up. The medical examiner testified his findings. And the toxicology report of Steve only showed cold medicine and the antidepressant which he was prescribed. So he didn't take Xanax. He wasn't taking anything extra because he wasn't drinking. And the toxicologist also brought up the lack of succinylcholine and why it would not be present. And they went on to explain how Kim staged the scene. Officers going to over 20 stores in the area trying to find somebody that remembered a woman that fit Kim's description. And they eventually did. They confirmed it was her by a photo. And the clerk said that, yes, this was the woman that came in and she bought beer and cigars. And the reason she was memorable was because the clerk complimented Kim's hair. Well, her color specifically, because she thought it was colored. And Kim was so rude. She was like, that's my natural hair color. Like, her being such a biatch kind of left an impression on the clerk. And the cigar pack found in the hotel room was traced back to this store, Kim purchasing them, just adding to the circumstantial case that they had, that they were trying to build. And the accounts of the hotel employee, Elaine Phillips, and her cousin, Philip Parker, who was staying at the resort, contradicted some of Kim's story. As they described their version of that night, a car pulled up to the lobby, shut off the lights, turned off the motor. Like, if you're in a really panicked state, you're not going to sit there and turn off your lights, turn off your motor. And Kim came into the lobby, and they said she had her cell phone held to her ear upside down, just listening to it. And Kim calmly walked up to them and said, quote, I need to speak to someone who works here. And Philip, who was standing there, kind of pointed towards Elaine, like she does. And Elaine said, can I help you? And Kim replied calmly, my room is on fire. And they were like, what's your room number? To no answer. And they were like, well, what's your name? And she gave her name, Kim Hricko. And they looked up the room number. Elaine called 911, and 911 said that they had already been contacted. And they were like to Kim, is anybody in the room? And she said her husband was. Elaine basically said that her and her cousin were more worked up than Kim was. During the trial, Kim was also asked about her little trip after returning to the room that night. When Kim claims Steve was pressuring her for sex, she claimed she was driving to a friend's house in Easton, which was about 15 minutes away, and she claimed she got lost for over an hour. But she had her cell phone the whole time, and she knew her friend's phone number. The friend testified, quote, I asked her why she didn't call me, and she said it was too late. I didn't want to wake you up. The court transcripts cracked me up. Feels like a Judge Judy response. Quote, why, this is from the judge, why at a given hour would one be unwilling to wake up with a phone call the very same people one was fully intended to wake up by ringing the doorbell? Like, that's awesome. They brought up how, according to Kim, Steve was heavily drinking, yet the bar tab was $5.51. And they told Kim that his blood alcohol level was 0.0. Her response was, quote, I don't know why. I don't understand. During the trial, many witnesses testified how Kim confided in them how unhappy she was, the coworker that she offered the $50,000 to. The prosecutor brought up how Kim stood to gain up to $450,000 from the life insurance policy. Steve's sister testified that the day after Steve's death, Kim went to Steve's parents to do like funeral plans. And she said, quote, it was fine with her if we took care of it all, except that the cremation was decided on. Like, what a strange thing to be fixated on, unless you're trying to destroy evidence. And this chick, Kim, just going around laying out her plan step by step to all of her friends. Like, why? The prosecution painted this great picture of the motive, the opportunity that she had, and they reminded everyone how Kim had access to this succinylcholine, which it was not a narcotic, so it's not going to be as strictly monitored, and it's readily available in the operating rooms where Kim would have worked. The trial ended in 1998 when Judge William Horn sentenced Kim Hricko to life in prison for murder and 30 years for arson, the two sentences to be served concurrently. Steve's sister, Jen Hricko, said, quote, it will help a little bit, but Steve's not back. In 2000, the Court of Special Appeals in Maryland upheld the conviction. While serving her time, Kim has written numerous essays complaining about the lack of privileges, how she can't hold her own granddaughter, and how she can't read Game of Thrones. Like, what? Steve can't meet his granddaughter, so Steve can't read Game of Thrones either. You took that away. Kim still maintains her innocence. She claimed that Steve died from a smoking incident. And that is the tragic story of a wife robbing her daughter of a father and the world of Steve. And she might have gotten away with it if she kept her big mouth shut. Like, thankfully she didn't. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you need more content or just want to help support the podcast, head on over to patreon.com and search Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you need some schnazzy merch, you can find it at crowdmade.com by searching Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you have a story you'd like to share, you can email it to ouchwasthataghost@yahoo.com. You can also find us on Facebook and all the other social media platforms under Ouch, Was That a Ghost?
Help me.
All links can also be found on ouchwasthataghost.com.